talk about some of the more significant NFL draft-related injury stories with our friend Dr. Amelia Wiggins. We have chatted with one of the experts from Ortho Cincy every single week since way back in August. We love Ortho Cincy. The thing I love most about Ortho Cincy is they've got specialists and locations all across the tri-state, and they offer walk-in orthopedic urgent care weekdays from 9 to 9 and Saturdays from 9 to 1. Learn more at orthocincy.com. That's orthocincy.com. Dr. Amelia Wiggins from Ortho Cincy is with us. I want to talk about a tight end, Luke Musgrave from Oregon State. This is a player who, if not for the injury he suffered last year, some believe he might be the first tight end gone. Unfortunately for him, he got injured during Week 2 against Fresno State. The injury to his MCL required surgery. He did not come back and play in 2022. So let's start with that. Let's start with him. What are the usual signs of an MCL injury?
The MCL injury, so that's the ligament on the inside of the knee. We call it the medial collateral ligament. It's on the medial or the inside of the knee. And typically you will injure that if you have an outside force to the knee. So if somebody falls into you and they hit the outside of the knee, the knee collapses inside or into this valgus force, and that can cause a stretch or a tear of the MCL. It's a very common injury, especially in our football players. That's actually the number one reason why they wear those protective braces, is to help prevent MCL injuries. And so with him, that's what happened. He fell into that valgus force and it stretched that MCL. So you have pain on the inside, you can have some swelling. That's what the MCL injury is.
If you're evaluating him as, running a team and you're thinking about drafting him, are there legitimate concerns that he is going to be able to play at 100% within a year of suffering the actual injury?
Well, no. I mean, rehab, even after surgery, after an MCL injury, the rehab would be 6 to 9 months, 9 months to a year. It is interesting that he had surgery. Most MCL injuries, we grade them 1, 2, and 3. Even an isolated grade 3 does not necessarily require surgery. We typically do a surgery on an MCL injury if there's other ligaments or something else in the knee has been injured. That's usually when we think surgery. Of course, he is a high-level athlete, so if he's looking, obviously, to get into the NFL, that could have swayed, him and the doctors to make the decision to go ahead and operate on an isolated grade 3 MCL to make sure it is 100% for the remaining of his career. But I would say, he had surgery back in the fall. He should be good to go for this upcoming season.
I want to talk about a player from just up the road in Columbus, arguably the best wide receiver in the draft, Jackson Smith-Njigba. So this is a kid who in 2021 had an otherworldly season. Last year, he dealt with hamstring issues, and he initially suffered the injury week 1. Then it reoccurred week 3. Popped up again week 8. He did not play for the Buckeyes in the college football playoff. There was, I think, some suspicion that he might have been able to play it, and maybe had they won that game, he could have played in the national championship game, but that didn't happen. When there is such a reoccurrence of the same issue, how much of a red flag is that?
It's definitely a concern. He's about to go into one of the hardest careers of all time, and his body will take a beating. So if you start to get into these chronic injuries, that does become a concern, because football is obviously such an explosive sport, especially at his position. But I think he was smart to take his time. When you do have a chronic injury, he said he went back twice throughout the season and he wasn't able to keep playing. I think he made a very mature decision to not rush it back for the national playoff. He understood that his sights, were bigger. And if you really let these chronic injuries heal the first time around, then hopefully he won't have to worry about it moving forward.
There's allowing the injury to heal, and then there's doing everything in your grasp to ensure that the injury doesn't crop up again. So for him moving forward, what can he do?
It's with these hamstring injuries, it's usually the proximal attachment where it first starts. That tendon just gets unhealthy with the repetitive explosion and wear and tear. He has got to keep a balance of mobility and strength. He can't be too tight. He can't be too weak. He can't be too loose. He can't be too strong. And that's up to him and his athletic trainers and his physical therapist to help get him there.
Let's talk about a player. Dr. Amelia Wiggins is with us from Ortho Cincy. Let's talk about a player who has long since been drafted, played for the Bengals last year, and then on Christmas Eve he suffered a devastating knee injury. And he told reporters last week it was actually worse than originally was reported. Suffered injuries to his ACL, MCL, and PCL, the big three, for lack of a better way of putting it. He says the rehab is going well. Obviously, his status for the year, for at least the start of training camp, is still very much kind of up in the air. When you're dealing with injuries to all three, how much more difficult is the treatment, the recovery, and the rehab as opposed to when a player is dealing with something limited to just an MCL or just an ACL or just a PCL?
Yes, of course. Every time we injure more than one thing, that it's obviously a worse injury. The surgery is harder. The recovery is harder. The long-term prognosis, becomes longer to get him back on the field and at 100%. Certainly, ACL and MCL injuries, we see those commonly happen together. So that typically doesn't delay our timeline to get back on the field. When you add that PCL in, especially if he had to have a surgery specifically for the PCL to reconstruct that, that does make that injury much more significant, and it extends how long that he will be out of the game. I would say it's 9 months to a year, as we know with Joe Burrow for an ACL. When you add that PCL, it really gets more to be 12 months to 15 months, even up to 18 months or so. But it sounds like he's doing well. He's on the road to recovery. So we'll see. Hopefully he can go week one. But I was surprised to hear that his PCL was torn as well.
When you're dealing with that and it's all three, do all three get addressed in the same procedure, or does he have to go back for multiple surgeries?
We can do it either way, and it really depends on how severe the injuries are and what needs to be done at time of surgery. When you have more than one ligament that needs to be addressed, we often do what's called a staged procedure. We'll come the first time and fix the PCL, and then we'll come back 4 to 6 weeks later once that's had time to heal in and do the ACL and MCL. And a lot of times that gives actually the MCL time to heal on its own, so we can address later, has it healed enough, or do we need to address it? Sometimes, depending on the severity of the injury, all three can be addressed at once. But that's a big surgery. It's a lengthy surgery. It takes a lot of preparing from the doctor's end and extensive rehab either way, whether you have 2 surgeries or 1. This is a big injury to recover from.
Awesome insight as always. Great to talk to you. We'll do it again soon. Thank you so much. Hey, it's Mo Egg.